And the level of SEN resources mainstream schools have also varies across the country.
To use your capital letters, mind, in full stops.
13-year-old Lewis settles down to do his schoolwork. However, he won't be going anywhere near a classroom. Lewis, who lives in South Gloucestershire, has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. His mother Hayley has taken him out of the Grange, his mainstream school near Bristol, because she's unhappy with his progress.
Different to working in school. You haven't got those people around you chatting to you, and you can't make mistakes really. Chatting to people and getting told off. Like the teacher explain it to you, and she'll say, "Well, go on then," and I'm like, "Well, miss, I get stuck," and she just, "Well, go on then and do it," and I just, once I can't do something, I blank it. That's me.
The Grange school gave Lewis 7.5 hours a week of extra support. However, Hayley says that's not enough.
Last year, his reading age was 7 years and 5 months. A year on, it's 7 years and 6 months. So at this rate, he'll still be leaving school with a reading age of 7 years and 9 months.
Right.
Which to me is not good enough.
That's no good for nobody.
It's he's not going to get very far.
The ratio of dedicated staff to pupils with SEN varies from one school to another. While Glossopdale has 1 member of staff to every 6 SEN pupils, the Grange has only 1 to 11, although the Grange's latest Ofsted report says the school does well with children with SEN. In a statement, the school said,
"Increased learning support would help Lewis improve his organisational skills. The level of funding available to schools is not yet at a level where all students' social and emotional needs can be met."
I won't blame the Grange for what they've done, because the Grange has done a lot. But
they're limited, aren't they?
They're limited with money. But if the LEA would put funds in, for not just my son, there's other children in the Grange who's got difficulties, not just like Lewis. And, you know, they got just as much chance as the rest of the pupils at that school.
Lewis's family are also unhappy about the limitations they see in the national curriculum.
He don't need to be learning French or Italian when he don't know his actual English himself. If they could give him more lessons on more probably maths or English instead of everything else, then I think he would have more of a chance of learning a bit better.
Some special schools argue that their expertise and resources can make them much more appropriate for this sort of case than mainstream. This is Alderman Knight School at Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire, a special school for children with moderate learning difficulties.
This school is organised in the same format at secondary level as any mainstream secondary school. It has the same national curriculum subjects, including the foreign language, and children move around from subject-based teachers throughout the school. The setting within the school is much more informal, small groups. We're able to observe children in their development and their social interaction. We're able to monitor their behaviours as well as their curriculum development, so that we're able to access their learning at a level that suits their needs, tailored curriculum, in a way that perhaps a large secondary school may not be able to manage this.
Jessica is one of Alderman Knight's 60 pupils. Like Lewis, she struggled in a mainstream school.
Jessica has a range of difficulties, primarily dyspraxia, but she has learning difficulties, finds it very hard to retain information, and generally has a reading ability and an overall ability that is roughly of an age 7 or 8 year old, and Jessica's currently 15. Jessica started off in mainstream school. She wasn't included with her lack of ability in certain areas and the approach that Jessica needed. She needed specialist teaching. She was becoming very distressed in a mainstream school. She would actually cling on to the car door, and we would try and pull her off to get her into school. The reason for choosing Alderman Knight was because straight away I could see that there were a range of techniques that the teachers had within their toolkit, if you like, that would try different things, and we hoped that that would unlock the door for Jessica.
The curriculum is meaningful to them. They're able to meet their targets and feel that they're succeeding, and they have a goal clearly to which they can achieve. Therefore, their self-esteem, self-worth, behaviour tends to be addressed within those goals.
But Alderman Knight School is under threat of closure. Conservative leader David Cameron, a local MP and himself the parent of a disabled boy, was directly involved in the fight to prevent its closure. Despite a temporary reprieve, the school's future remains in the balance. This worries parents like Kim, the mother of 13-year-old Jake, who is autistic.
I was told, you don't stand a chance, the school is closing. There's no point sending him there if he's only going to be there for 2 or 3 years. I took the view that 2 or 3 years in a special school of what this school caters for is far better than sending Jake to a mainstream school where they wouldn't understand him.
I asked you a question, didn't I?
I know that bringing him here, he is included in everything that goes on, whether it's school trips, pantomimes, cooking, going out for the day. He's just included in everything. It's just like a normal school.
There have been concerns, categorically denied by the DFES, that the threat to Alderman Knight is simply an example of a national policy to reduce special schools provision as part of the inclusion agenda. Not only is Baroness Warnock clearly against any reduction in special school capacity, but some mainstream schools are also keen to retain this provision. Alderman Knight's close neighbour is Tewkesbury Comprehensive School, which has 240 children with special educational needs of its own. Despite the head teacher's own commitment to inclusion, he was one of the key campaigners to keep it open.
Alderman Knight is catering for children whose difficulties are too severe for a school like mine to cope with. And they are children whose difficulties make it impossible for them to cope with a school like mine. They find the whole thing too big, they sort of get people blindness. They just can't cope, so they'll go and hide away in corners and they won't succeed in my school. In Alderman Knight, they will emerge with anything up to 5 or 6 GCSEs. It's a wonderful provision, and that's why I'm so dead keen to keep it.
Another measure Baroness Warnock now regrets is the Statement of Special Educational Needs. Introduced in the 1981 Education Act, the statement comprises a legally binding list of specific assistance and the school where the child should get it. It's become a parent's passport to getting help for their child.
That, of course, was a terrible, divisive thing to introduce, because just about in 1981, the date of that act, the education cuts became acute, or began to become acute, and local authorities were more and more strapped for money. And they, therefore, began to put into the statement as little as they could decently get away with, because they knew they had to provide whatever was in the statement. And, of course, that meant that parents, first of all, demanded statements for their children, because they thought that otherwise they wouldn't get any special help at all. And secondly, they began to be very critical of what was in the statement because they thought it wasn't enough.
Despite recent spending increases in education, similar problems remain today. Many statements are contested, and parents who disagree with the LEA's decision need determination and money to challenge it.
Recently, the parents who have been able to send their children to this school have been the parents who have pushed open doors through going to see paediatricians, educational psychologists, or even to tribunals where they have wanted alternative provision because their placement within the mainstream, for whatever reason, has not been satisfactory. And therefore, the parents are often more articulate and middle class than they have been in the past.
The government's SEN strategy signals a shift towards phasing out statementing in favour of directly funding schools to support children with special needs. In the interim, however, some parents remain dissatisfied.
They have to have so many points to have a statement funded, and I'm under the impression that he falls about 12 points below. And so, as far as we're concerned, the statement really isn't worth the piece of paper it's written on. If it's not funded, why bother have a statement at all?
Baroness Warnock's recent declarations on special educational needs have prompted a cross-party select committee inquiry in Parliament, and statementing is one area under examination.
What on earth is going on in statementing? How does statementing work? Why is it that some parents who can afford to challenge a statement in court can, if they can, pay 10, 15, 20,000 pounds, can get a statement changed, or can get a statement, can challenge the refusal to statement a child. And what happens if you haven't got that money? So statementing there's a very big question about what exactly is happening there. Who does get a statement, who doesn't?
Another contentious issue the committee has decided to look into is how the government's SEN strategy fits in with its commitment to parental choice.
If it's right in mainstream education or education that is not to do with special educational needs, it is also right here and in special education. And as far as we possibly can arrange it, I think special education has to give that amount of choice, as far as we can, to those parents.
However, not everyone thinks that in the long run, choice will be best for the children involved.
We don't think parents should have the choice of choosing separate special school. We think it's a children's rights issue, and you have to think of the outcome into mainstream society when a child has finished their education.
And when you're talking about parental choice, you're undoubtedly also talking about the league tables which inform that choice.
League tables and all the testing and all the other things which go on, which are trying to make schools compare themselves to each other, compete with each other, and make people choose them on the basis of these very arbitrary results, are all anti-inclusion. They all make it much harder because they're following a different philosophy altogether. They're bringing in competition. Inclusion is about collaboration. It's about equality. It's about valuing all young people and bringing in the support that they need.
There are many special needs children, for example, those with visual difficulties, hearing impairments, Asperger's and so on, who are intellectually often very bright. They could have a very positive effect on school league tables. I suppose if you were to ask me statistically, it's probably the case that more of our special needs children have very basic learning difficulties that translate into particularly writing difficulties. That can make it very difficult for them to demonstrate what they're good at in a written exam. Now, of course, our whole education system and the dreadful league tables are based on written examinations, so they will not be pushing the league table statistics upwards.
The competitiveness of schools makes it essential that if there's a bit of money to spend, it's going to be spent on an extra teacher for the people who might get a few more A-levels if they had such teaching. The league tables seem to me one of the really harmful things that's happened to schools.
Baroness Warnock's recent publication has stirred up considerable debate, and Barry Shearman's Select Committee investigation may come up with answers to questions over the future of inclusion. However, with the apparent effect of league tables and the limited available resources, what will happen to pupils like Lewis?
But as the curriculum stands, it's not for Lewis. And so we're in a sort of catch-22 because he doesn't seem to fall into any category at the moment.
He's just going to go nowhere when he leaves school because he's just so...
He's so far behind, isn't he?
It's just an understatement. He's just... Well, he is. He's so far behind. You know, I've got a 7-year-old daughter and he struggles reading her books. So what does that say when things that... He can't do things like that? And I do worry about it immensely.